The morning after that explosive family dinner was a haze of cigarette smoke, stale coffee, and regret. I woke up on my cousin Caleb's couch with a stiff neck and the taste of acid in my throat. Not from alcohol, mind you, just bitterness. The kind that ferments slowly when the people you trust most pull the rug from under you with a smile. Caleb handed me a mug of Folgers, thick as tar and barely warm. He didn't say much, just sat beside me on that old plaid couch in his wood-paneled living room, the only sound being the soft buzz of his wife vacuuming in the next room. After a while, he muttered, "You good?" No, I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. I was still piecing everything together. How my sister's wedding had been hijacked. How our family's savings had vanished into this black hole orchestrated by Uncle Marty and his perfect little boy, Brett. They'd used my father's death as a smokescreen, feeding us platitudes while bleeding us dry. That morning, sitting in Caleb's house, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let it go. Not this time. Not like all the other times when people said, "That's just family," or "Don't make waves." Screw that. This time, I was going to burn it all down. I didn't jump right into revenge, though. No, that's not how it works when it's real. First, I did what any normal person would do. I tried to talk sense into people. I visited my mother a few days later. She was in the kitchen, chopping carrots like they owed her money. Her face was tight, drawn, like she hadn't slept since the wedding planning meeting. She offered me meatloaf and iced tea, like nothing had happened. When I brought up the finances, the checks, the mysteriously bloated catering costs, she waved it off. Said I was just stressed, or jealous, because Brett was doing something with his life. I felt like I was going crazy. I asked her how she could ignore the fact that Dad's savings had disappeared right around the time Uncle Marty became helpful. She got real quiet then. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Well, maybe your father would have wanted it this way." That one gutted me. I left before I said something unforgivable. But I knew then, I was on my own. No backup, no allies. Just me and a hunch that my cousin and uncle were up to something far bigger than a few $1,000 skimmed off a wedding. So I did what people in 1975 rarely did unless they had real problems. I went to the courthouse. Public records were still paper in those days. That meant hours hunched over musty ledgers and microfiche reels in a dimly lit basement, squinting through dust motes and wondering if I was just being paranoid. But then, I found it. A business license, issued under a name I didn't recognize, Sunrise Events Limited. But the listed address? That was Uncle Marty's business suite. You know, the one he supposedly downsized after Dad passed? Turns out, Sunrise Events was billing the wedding as a full-scale corporate event. And guess who was listed as CEO? Brett. My stomach twisted when I found the invoices. The markups were astronomical. The caterer charged double the standard rate. The venue? A public park they rented for practically nothing, but billed us as if it were the goddamn Waldorf Astoria. Floral arrangements? Bought wholesale from a roadside vendor, billed as imported specialty bouquets. All of it flowed through Sunrise Events Limited, and all of it billed to us, my mother, mostly, under the guise of trusted family arrangements. That's when the scope of it hit me. This wasn't about one wedding. This was a scam. And Brett? He wasn't just playing dress up as a businessman. He was laundering money, using our family as a front. The wedding was just one part of a long con. And it wasn't just personal anymore. It was criminal. I didn't know what to do at first. I was just a guy with a box full of invoices and a broken heart. But I had one advantage. I wasn't a criminal. I wasn't trying to cover my tracks or fake a paper trail. Everything I found was real, documented, cross-checked. So I called a friend of mine, Frankie, who worked in accounting for a mid-size insurance firm. He owed me a favor. I showed him the files, laid everything out like a crime scene. He whistled low, shook his head, and said, "They're laundering through family events? That's ballsy." Frankie helped me trace more payments. Turns out, Brett had done this to 3 other clients before us, all family friends, older couples who didn't ask questions. One was a neighbor who'd paid him to organize a retirement party. Another was a church acquaintance who needed help coordinating a funeral. Each time, the costs ballooned mysteriously. Each time, the money flowed through Sunrise Events. And each time, Brett walked away with a cut. It was brilliant, morally bankrupt, but brilliant, and illegal as hell. Now I had to decide what kind of revenge I wanted. I could have gone straight to the police. I had enough evidence to blow it all open. But something in me wanted more than that. Not just legal punishment, but humiliation. I wanted Brett to feel what it was like to be played, to have the rug pulled out in front of everyone. So I waited. I waited until the day of the wedding. Yes, I let it happen. I watched as my mother cried watching Lily walk down the aisle. I watched Brett give a smug speech about new beginnings and family legacies. I waded through the cheap champagne, the plastic cutlery, the dancing on rented parquet. And then I made my move. It's a strange thing, letting a trap play out in slow motion. There's this part of you that wants to scream, to warn everyone, to shake your mother by the shoulders and say, look, open your damn eyes. But there's also this other part, the cold, calculated part. The one that watches the pieces move across the board and knows exactly where the checkmate lands. I let the wedding go on. Every cheesy cover band song, every dry chicken dinner, every tacky rented chair. But I wasn't just standing there doing nothing. While everyone else was taking Polaroids and sipping bottom shelf wine, I was handing out envelopes. Small ones, cream-colored, classy, even. Inside each one was a photocopy of a Sunrise Events invoice and a short note. If you've ever paid Brett or Marty for an event and wondered where your money went, let's talk. Monday night, the Copper Lantern Bar, 7 p.m. A concerned relative. I gave one to Mrs. Donnelly, who just paid Brett $5,000 for her son's graduation party. I gave one to Pastor Hill, who Brett conned into organizing the church's spring gala. I even gave one to the guy running the sound system. Turns out he'd been hired for exposure and never paid. Each time, I made sure no one saw. Casual, friendly, like I was just thanking them for coming. I was playing the long game, the quiet game. But Brett was getting cocky. 3 days after the wedding, I get a call from Lily. She's crying. I can barely understand her through the sobs. She's saying something about the hotel being canceled. How the honeymoon package was actually just a deposit on a motel in Daytona, and it was never finalized. She says Brett's blaming the travel agent, but nothing makes sense. That's when I drop the first bomb. I tell her there was no travel agent, that the package wasn't real, that Brett used the wedding money to reimburse his company. At first, she doesn't believe me. She hangs up. 2 hours later, she calls again. This time, she's quiet. She asks me to come over. When I get to their apartment, she looks like a ghost. The place is barely unpacked, boxes still taped shut, the "just married" banner drooping over the fireplace like a sad joke. She shows me a folder. Inside, more fake invoices, generic contracts, a consulting agreement between Sunrise Events and some LLC in Delaware that doesn't even exist. Lily says she found them in Brett's filing cabinet while he was at work. She looks me dead in the eye and asks, what the hell is going on? So I tell her everything. I don't spare the details. I tell her about the paper trail, the inflated costs, the kickbacks, the other families. I show her the folder I've been building. I don't make it dramatic, just the facts, cold and hard. She listens, silent. Then she says, I need time. I nod, but inside, I know. She's done. Monday night rolls around. I head to the Copper Lantern, this dusty, wood-paneled dive bar with sticky tables and neon signs that haven't worked right since the Nixon years. I slide into a booth and wait. I wasn't sure anyone would show, but then Mrs. Donnelly walks in, then Pastor Hill, then 2 people I don't even recognize, but they introduce themselves as cousins of someone Brett scammed last year. By 7:30, there are 9 of us packed into that booth, huddled around copies of invoices, timelines, checks. We share stories, we compare numbers, and we realize something big. Brett and Marty have been using family events to funnel money through a fake company for years. It wasn't just the wedding, it was birthdays, funerals, reunions, even a bar mitzvah back in '73 that Brett billed as a logistics nightmare and charged $8,000 for when the whole thing happened in a backyard. We tally up the total, conservatively, over $120,000. Adjusted for today's dollars, that's close to $800,000. I feel my stomach turn. That money came from pensions, savings, inheritances. These weren't rich people. These were our people. We decide it's time. Step 1. The audit. Frankie helps draft a formal complaint to the IRS. We attach every document we've got. Invoices, contracts, handwritten notes. We present it like a gift basket. Tidy, indexed, and undeniable. Step 2. Public shame. We write an anonymous letter to the local paper. Not just about Brett, but about the trend of fake event companies scamming small-town families. They bite. A reporter named Joanne calls me the next day. I pretend to be a source close to the victims. I feed her everything. She digs deeper, finds 2 more victims. The story runs on a Thursday. Front page. When family turns fraudulent, the small-town event scam bleeding communities dry. Step 3. Implosion. I knew Brett would try to fight it. He always did. But this time, he couldn't. Lily had left him by then, packed up and moved in with a friend across town. She left him a letter that ended with, "You married me for a scam. I'm not staying for the fallout." The same day the article ran, Brett's business partner, another cousin, pulled out, closed their joint account, reported suspicious activity to the bank. Uncle Marty tried to downplay everything, said it was a misunderstanding, but no one bought it, especially not the pastor, whose voice shook with rage when he confronted Marty in church the next Sunday. The IRS audit hit like a freight train. Fines, back taxes, frozen accounts. Turns out, Sunrise Events hadn't paid a dime in federal tax in 3 years. The penalties alone would have sunk them, but with the fraud exposure, it was a death blow. Brett tried to blame Marty. Marty tried to blame Brett. They turned on each other like jackals. By the end of the year, Sunrise Events was dissolved. Brett filed for bankruptcy. Uncle Marty retired early and moved 3 counties over, trying to outrun the shame. But in small-town America, you don't outrun much. They were pariahs. Me? I didn't feel triumphant. Not at first. There were days I questioned it, wondered if maybe I'd gone too far, if maybe I should have just let it slide, let the family save face. But then I'd see Mrs. Donnelly smiling as she hosted a real party, one she paid for with help from the community. Or I'd run into Lily, volunteering at the local library, finally living without someone siphoning her life from behind the curtain. And I'd remember, they deserved it. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because sometimes, justice wears a dusty blazer and drinks cheap beer in a dive bar on a Monday night. Sometimes, revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, precise, permanent. When you destroy a man's fake empire, you don't always get to see the moment it falls. But sometimes, if you're patient enough, you do. It happened 2 weeks after the article dropped. The town was still buzzing. The paper got picked up by a regional station. Some afternoon news anchor did a segment with dramatic music and a slow zoom on Brett's yearbook photo. It was surreal, like watching a true crime special, except I knew every name, every porch in the background. But I wasn't expecting what came next. That Wednesday, I'm working my job at the repair shop. Just another day breathing in motor oil and listening to the boss complain about Nixon. When the door chimes, in walks Lily. Her hair's pulled back, simple dress, no makeup, just tired eyes and a manila envelope clutched to her chest like a life vest. She doesn't say anything at first, just walks over, hands me the envelope, and says, "He doesn't know I took these." Inside, ledgers, real ledgers, not the fake receipts Brett used to show people. Handwritten, yellowed pages tracking payments, deposits, and kickbacks from as far back as 1968. Not just from the event company, either. There were entries tied to construction projects, car sales, even a fundraiser that Marty ran for veterans, which turned out to be a front. It was worse than I thought. Lily says Brett kept it all for control, said it made him feel powerful, having the real records while feeding the family lies. She smiles. Not a happy smile, a resigned one, like someone who's finally finished drowning. "I want you to bury him," she says. That night, I sit at my kitchen table for 5 straight hours, cross-checking every entry against our other documents. It all matches. Every inflated bill, every consulting fee, every shell company they registered in states I'd never even been to. And at the center, Uncle Marty. Turns out Brett was just the eager apprentice. Marty had been pulling this con since before I was born. He built a career on it, taught Brett every trick, used family as a shield, weddings as a pipeline, and small-town trust as his bankroll. That flipped something in me. Up until then, part of me thought maybe Brett was just lost, caught in something bigger than him. But this showed me he wasn't just complicit, he was proud of it. He wanted to be like Marty. So yeah, we buried them both. Step 1. The IRS revisited. We sent the new ledgers to the same auditor. But this time, we attached sworn statements from Lily and the sound guy, who admitted he'd been told to forge receipts as a favor. We didn't have to beg them to act. The moment those real books landed on their desk, the IRS opened a full-scale investigation. And this time, it went back 7 years. Step 2. The Attorney General. One of the people from the Copper Lantern crew, Tom, had a niece working in the state AG's office. We didn't go public, just passed along the same folder, with a note, potential criminal fraud spanning multiple counties. Multi-generational scheme. Will cooperate. It took them 3 weeks to respond. But when they did, they opened a criminal probe. Suddenly, Brett wasn't just dodging taxes. He was looking at fraud, wire tampering, and conspiracy. Marty too. Here's where things get weird. I thought they'd lawyer up, but Brett, he tried to settle. He called me, not his lawyer, me. Middle of a Thursday afternoon. I'm eating leftover pot roast in my kitchen when the phone rings. And when I hear his voice, I freeze. He sounds calm, Like we're just two cousins catching up after a ball game. He says, we should talk. I say, about what? He says, about fixing this before it gets ugly. I laugh. I actually laugh. Then I ask him if he's seen the news. He pauses. Then, quiet. I'm not like Marty. I didn't want this to go so far. That's when I lose it. I tell him everything. How I watched him lie to Lily. How I watched him fake vendors and bully old ladies into overpaying. How he stood there at his own wedding and smiled, knowing he was robbing everyone blind. I tell him I hoped it would get ugly, because sometimes, ugly is what you need to see the rot. He hangs up. 2 days later, Brett is arrested for obstruction, tried to shred some receipts during the investigation. A week after that, Marty is indicted. 5 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and tax evasion. The feds froze his assets, seized his cabin in Vermont, took his classic Corvette, even repossessed the antique jukebox he always bragged about. Family reunion? Cancelled. Thanksgiving that year was real quiet. It's funny. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired, like I'd been holding my breath for 4 years and finally let it out. But then Lily called. She said she was moving. Not far. Just a small house by the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Said she got a job at the local bookstore and was thinking about going back to school for accounting, of all things. Said, I want to make sure this never happens to anyone else. I told her I was proud. We met for coffee a week later, and for the first time since her wedding, she smiled like she meant it. So what happened to me? I stayed in town, got promoted at the shop, started dating again. Nothing serious, but for the first time in years, I felt clean. I don't go to family events anymore. Not all of them, anyway. Some of the older folks still whisper, still think I tore the family apart. But most, they thank me, quietly, in the parking lot, at the grocery store, at the post office. Thanks for saving us, one guy said, tearing up as he picked up stamps. Because that's the thing. Sometimes revenge isn't about making someone pay. Sometimes it's about making sure no one else has to. The trial came and went like a long, heavy storm. You ever sit through a trial for someone you used to share birthday cake with? It's surreal. Brett pled guilty to reduced charges. His lawyer worked a deal. Obstruction, mail fraud, tax evasion. The kind of cocktail that stings but doesn't destroy. He got 5 years, served just under 3 in a minimum security facility in Illinois. Word is he spent his time writing letters to no one and teaching other inmates how to optimize their businesses. Marty, though, they threw the book at him. He fought it, of course, claimed he was the victim of a personal vendetta, said the documents were forged, that the family turned against him because of jealousy. The jury didn't buy it. He got 13 years, lost his business license. The AG made a show of it, protecting working-class families from white-collar predators. It was one of the only times I saw my state do something right. And as poetic justice would have it, the last wedding Marty ever booked was his own granddaughter's. She canceled it after reading the articles, said she wouldn't let her name be stained by a criminal. Sometimes life does write good endings. People ask me if I ever felt guilty. Not in the beginning, no, but afterward, when things settled, when Brett's mom called me crying, asking why I'd done it. Yeah, I felt something. Guilt's not the right word. Grief, maybe. Grief for what we could have been. Our family used to be close. Sunday barbecues, summer lake trips, cousins crashing on each other's couches. It wasn't all fake. That's what made the betrayal hurt worse. They used that closeness, twisted it, turned it into leverage. It took me a long time to stop blaming myself for not seeing it sooner. I remember this one afternoon, about a year after the sentencing. I was walking past the old church downtown, the one where Brett and Lily got married. They'd repainted it, fixed the fence. Someone was planting lilacs by the front steps. And for the first time in years, I stopped and just looked at it. Not as a crime scene, not as a memory, just a building. And I realized, I didn't hate them anymore. I didn't miss them either. I'd outgrown the war. Lily and I stayed in touch for a while. We'd meet for coffee every few months, talk about work, life. One time she brought her niece, and the kid showed me her drawing of a cat lawyer. Yes, I still have it on my fridge. Eventually she moved across state lines, met someone new. She mailed me a postcard from Oregon. Just a pine tree and the words, I'm good. Thank you. That was enough. Years later, I heard Brett got out and moved to Arizona. Tried to start a landscaping business. Not sure how that panned out. I don't care to know. Marty? He died in prison. Heart failure. The kind of death that just happens. No drama. No final words. Just a whisper in the warden's ear. He left behind a box of books and a half-written memoir titled The Art of the Event. I didn't read it. Sometimes I get messages, anonymous ones. You ruined a good man. You made your family a punchline. But more often than not, I get the opposite. A wedding photographer in Pennsylvania wrote to me saying he caught his own uncle embezzling from the family business. And reading about Brett gave him the courage to speak up. A woman from Kansas said she almost married into a family that was laundering money through church weddings. My story made her dig deeper. Even a preacher from Georgia sent a thank you note. Said, "Some sins wear tuxedos." That one stuck with me. I don't tell this story for applause. I tell it because I need to remember that even the worst betrayals don't define you forever. That you can love your family and still hold them accountable. That silence is not loyalty. That weddings should be sacred, not used as a wallet buffet for greedy men in cheap suits. And maybe most of all, that revenge isn't always about fire and fury. Sometimes it's paperwork, patience, persistence. Sometimes it's staring down the people who broke your heart and saying, "Not anymore." So yeah, that was the wedding. That was the fraud. That was the reckoning. And this is the peace that followed. Thanks for reading. If you made it this far, I hope you remember, even if the liars wear ties and smile for photos, even if everyone else calls it just business, even if the truth feels like a wrecking ball in your chest, you are not crazy for seeing the cracks. You're just the first one brave enough to point. And sometimes, that's what starts the fall.